All right, so let's get started. I'm Srinivas Palanki, and let me see if I can. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes, sir. If that control panel is bothering you, there's a small white arrow, orange rectangle.
Okay, this one. Oh, okay. All right. So let's get started. I'm Srinivas Palanki. I'm actually currently chair of department head for chemical and biomolecular engineering at the University of South Alabama. And I'll be moving to Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas next month, actually end of this month. So I thought I'll put together this talk on my experience as department head. Just a brief biography. I started my academic career in 1992. And I got my PhD in 92 from the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. And as soon as I got my PhD, I moved to Florida State University, essentially starting at the bottom, assistant professor. And then I got promoted to associate professor in 97, and then full professor in 2003. And then in 2000, so I was there until 2006 December. So January 2007, I moved to the University of South Alabama as department head. And so I've been there 8 years as department head. And so I was full professor and department head there. And now I'll be moving as a chaired professor, as the Garrett chair, and also dean of engineering at Lamar University. So that's basically my background. And so what I did was I put together, I basically have 10 tips on at least what worked for me. So tip number one is, have a clear vision. It's one sometimes. And there are several different ways you can become department head. One could be that you want the job, you've thought about it. There are things you didn't like about how the department was being run, and you want to fix those. And sometimes you are in a scenario where you get the job because nobody wants it, or it's by rotation and it's your turn. But whichever way you get this job, you have to have a clear vision on what you plan on doing in the next 3 to 5 years typically. And so it's good to have a clear vision. You should have a vision statement. It helps to write this down. Otherwise you will be in a scenario which is shown in this cartoon here, where everybody is going off in their own direction and nothing's happening. Now the vision should be developed with a realistic understanding of what the constraints are. I mean, one could have a vision that will become MIT, and it is highly unlikely that that would happen in 3 to 5 years unless you have a lot of resources. And so the vision has to be realistic. Now it's very important to get your boss on board, and typically that's the dean of engineering and the boss's boss, which at least in the US is called the provost. In India, I think it might be the dean might be the college principal and the provost might be the vice chancellor. I'm not quite sure. Now, they have to agree with your vision. And if they don't agree with your vision, then there's not a whole lot that will be done, because finally they are the ones who control the resources. So if you want more faculty, or if you want more funding for building certain infrastructure, they have to buy in. It helps if the vision statement is in writing. Frequently one has certain ideas when you start your job, and then 6 months later you're so bogged down with small details that you have forgotten what the big picture was. So it helps to have something in writing that gets looked at on very frequent intervals. Now it should also be clearly articulated to the faculty. Very frequently the faculty may be reluctant participants to your vision initially, because especially if you're a department head who has come from outside. I ran into that scenario. I was hired from another university, so I was department head for a department where I did not know anybody. Everybody was new to me. And so faculty were sort of set in their ways. Things were not quite going the way the dean and the provost wanted. That's why I was hired from outside. And so there is usually some reluctance from the faculty to do the things you want them to do. So it helps if your vision is articulated to the faculty. If you write it down and keep it in your office, then nobody's going to know what you want them to do. Now, you should have a very clear evaluation process. That's tip number two. Um, Faculty always want to know, they know, in some sense, my experience as an administrator was faculty are like students, it's in some sense. And so, like students typically ask here, if you are teaching something, is this going to be on the test? And if it is not on the test, they don't want to learn. So, in some sense, faculty are the same way. They would like to know what is it that you're going to evaluate them on. Again, at least in the US, faculty raises are determined by department head done. So again, so let's role is to assign course to faculty. And so what happens is once the classes have been assigned, one could sort of take a hands-off approach. Say, okay, you teach this class, you teach thermodynamics, you teach circuits, you teach solid mechanics, and then that's it. You don't know what's going on. Uh, so I think one has to look at what innovative methods the faculty are using in teaching. And what I have done is I usually ask the faculty to write down for me at the end of every course what they have done in the course that worked, what have they done in the course that did not work, and what did they do in the course that was new. And what they did new might be something as simple as, oh, I came up with a new set of homework problems. And then you can say, okay, so what was innovative about that? And what could be innovative would be something that related to an incident that happened recently. For example, the Deepwater Horizon, the BP oil spill that happened about 200 miles away from where we are, where my department is. So I had a faculty member who was teaching fluid mechanics, and he actually got the students to calculate the flow rate coming out of that pipe that was leaking. Now, again, we do those sorts of problems all the time anyway. Flow through pipe is not the hardest problem in the world, but to relate it to an incident that happened sort of in our neighborhood is innovative because that makes the students remember. They remember the incident, and so they may also remember, okay, this is how we do this calculation. So I think that's important. One has to look at what did you do in the class that was interesting and new, and not necessarily in the book. The second evaluation mechanism is student evaluation. So at least in the US, students have to fill out a form at the end of the course where they evaluate two things. First, they evaluate how good the class was, and second, they evaluate how good the instructor was. Now, that's valuable information in general. If the teacher is not doing such a good job, students will say so, especially when the evaluations are anonymous. They don't have to write their name on who they are. And so at least you get a sense of what the class as a group thinks about that instructor and about that class. Now, one has to be a little careful. You cannot go completely by student evaluations only because there are certain classes that are just perceived to be hard. And however good a teacher you might be, hard classes tend to get evaluations that are a little lower than the ones that are perceived to be easy. That's the nature of the game. So you have to know your curriculum well. Now, if you are department head, you probably know your curriculum well. So that's something you have to keep in mind. I've also made classroom visits. And so you can sort of sit in the back of the class for about 15 minutes or so to see how the instructor interacts with the students. Now this is a bit artificial because the instructor knows that you're coming to class. I usually tell them in advance, and the instructor can see you in class. And so, the interaction on that particular day might be a little different from his or her everyday interaction, but still, it is still useful because people can change a little bit, but they cannot change completely. Research, in some sense, is a little easier to evaluate because we have quantitative metrics available. It is easy to count how much research funding a faculty member has. And again, in the US, funding is very important. You cannot get a whole lot of research done if you don't have funding from either the federal government or a company. So that is relatively easy to quantify. So if a faculty member has no funding, then obviously they are, either they are in a research area that's of no interest to anybody, or they are not very successful in their fundraising effort. Research publications, again, one can look at which journals faculty members are publishing in. And so, there is a quality aspect to it. So you can publish a lot of articles in journals that are not highly ranked, or you can publish a few articles in journals that are highly ranked. And again, usually people in the field know what the good journals are and what the not so good journals are. So that is a relatively easy to quantify metric. One can also look at how many masters and PhD students graduated that year and how many of them are in progress. And again, there is, you cannot have hard boundaries to this in some sense, because sometimes a very high quality work may require a little more time or may end up with fewer publications. And so it helps to know what the field is. But still, in general, my experience has been research is easier to evaluate than teaching because metrics can be quantified easily. Now, the service aspect is small. Normally, we limit it to less than 10% of a faculty member's time, but it is important for collegiality. It is important, because if faculty do not volunteer for committee work, then the work doesn't get done. These are details, but they're important details. And I usually split this into two. So, which is what is the service aspect that was done within the college or the university? So, the committees that you are on, curriculum committees, for example, that's an important aspect. It's tedious. It may not necessarily be the most interesting committee work, but it's important. And then the second aspect I look at is the service to the profession, which means did you chair sessions in a professional conference? Did you help review papers for a journal or a conference? And again, these are unpaid services. And if everybody stops doing them, then the profession will not progress. So it's important to give credit for doing this sort of work. And I usually take that into consideration. So tip number 3, and again, this is something I had seen when I first came to South Alabama. The department head had never, would never meet the faculty. He would just make a list of course teaching assignments and give it to the secretary, and the department faculty would find out from the secretary what they were supposed to teach that year. And then at the end of the year, he would try to give them a score on everything else. But the problem the department head wanted them to do. And so I think it's important to set expectations. What I normally do is in the month of August, I will talk to every faculty member and go over what I expect them to do. I'll tell them what the teaching assignment is. I will tell them what committees they are serving on. And then I'll tell them how much time is left over for research. And so research is basically, it's 100 minus your teaching assignment minus your service assignment. And so if say 40% of your time is assigned for research, then it is my job to lay out to the faculty member what I expect them to do in that 40%. Now, I'm not telling them how many proposals to write and how many papers to write and how many students to have, but I'm sort of broadly saying what 40% of their time should end up being. Now, it could change a little bit, and that's okay. So if they say they will write a proposal to the National Science Foundation, but then end up writing a proposal to the National Institutes of Health because this opportunity came along 3 months later, that's okay. But at least they should know I'm expecting to see two proposals and two publications or some rough number like that. This helps a lot. So, it helps to talk to the faculty members at the beginning of the year. Um, so, again, this summarizes what I was saying. I usually ask faculty members if they need any help in achieving these goals. And I usually was making the faculty member write down themselves what they wanted to do that year. And if that effort seems to be too little, then I will gently ask them to add more. And if it appears to be too much or too ambitious, then I'm not telling them to do less. Why should I ask somebody to do less? But I will usually ask them if they need any help in achieving these goals. Sometimes they may need some travel money to go to a funding agency to talk to the program manager. And again, that's a department head's role to help faculty members with such things. Um, I like to have these things in writing. So usually I would get the faculty member to write something up about what they plan to do, and then they sign off and I sign off. So at the end of the year, I have a document that I can compare with. So I will look at what they've actually done at the end of the year. That's usually in April or May. And so I look at the August document and I say, okay, in August, this is what you promised to do, and then this is what you have done. And if the faculty member has exceeded expectations, they obviously deserve a higher score. But if they have not met expectations, then they sort of see for themselves, they hadn't done what they had promised. And so usually they improve over time if that happens. It helps, tip number 4 is it helps to ask for periodic updates. Again, in August, faculty members might be very enthusiastic. The academic year is just starting. And so they may write down a bunch of things. Then 4 months go by and they have accomplished nothing. And so that can be a problem because then there's not much time to recover. And so I usually ask for data on teaching, research, and service periodically. Usually I'll ask them for a sort of a midterm review in December. And so the reason we do December is, at least in my university, we have every semester, end of every semester, we have a general faculty meeting where everybody from the college comes. And the department chairs are required to give a small presentation about what their faculty have been up to that semester. And so I don't ask faculty for data by saying, I'm going to evaluate you. It's more about, well, the dean wants the data so that I can talk about the department and how well we are doing. And so when you put a sort of positive spin on that, you can get some more information. And you will see there are some faculty members, they are on track, they're doing fine, but then there are some who are behind. And it's, just the mere fact that you're going to ask makes faculty a little more productive when the time comes for such data to be collected. Tip number 5, and again, this is something a lot of us forget. Faculty, sometimes they do, they do better. Like if faculty member is let's say, ahead of the curve, is doing a little better than the others. Um, or if they won a major award, it helps to praise them when they're making progress. Again, everybody likes to be told that they're doing a good job, however well known they might be. Small praise goes a long way. And so if a faculty member wins a competitive grant, I usually announce this in the faculty meeting. I will send an email to the faculty member congratulating him or her, and the important part is I actually send a copy to the rest of the department, so everybody gets to know that so and so won this award, or so and so won a teaching award, or whatever. It doesn't have to be something major. You don't have to win the Nobel Prize to get something like this, but just a small, again, small praise goes a long way. Another important role for the department's head is to nominate faculty members for awards. And Usually, there will be a teaching award or a research award at the college level. There will be one at perhaps the university level. Uh, and I have a typo, it's university or external, not off. Or it could be an external award. So the college awards are usually, sort of the lowest level, so that you're competing only with your own peers. But still, to even win that is an accomplishment because you won't, and not everybody wins every year. And so that's something to think about. If you nominate faculty members, even if they don't win, I think there is a sense of appreciation that you recognized that they were worthy of being nominated. And so, and over time, enough members from your department will win that they'll feel good about the fact that you were department head and they won this award. And so they will at least appreciate that. Um, Tip number 6 is to form teams. And again, especially in the US, it's becoming difficult to get single investigator awards for grant funding. It helps to be in teams. It helps to pair successful people with less successful people, and that way the whole department becomes more successful. And I have seen that for both teaching as well as research. So it helps to pair more experienced faculty with less experienced faculty. Especially if a faculty member is new, it helps for them to be talking periodically to somebody who has been there for some time. So they understand, they don't make the same mistakes that other faculty members have made in terms of teaching. Um, Same with research. It helps to form research teams to help new faculty get funding. Uh, and again, sometimes new faculty are not aware of what resources are available in the university. And so if you are in a team, you will at least you find out about how things work. Tip number 7 is lead from the front. Um, Again, no, department head's role is not purely administrative. They have to have their own teaching, research, and service activities. In general, you cannot make people do what you yourself do not do or have not done. And so, if you have never written a successful grant application in your life, you cannot make other people do it. It's just not how things go. I mean, the department head's job, in some sense, is the hardest job in the university because faculty consider the department head as their colleague, not necessarily their boss. Uh, and the department head knows most clearly what faculty are doing. Deans and provosts and presidents know less about how the department's functioning. And so, in general, it helps to lead by example rather than, cracking the whip and making people do what they don't want to do. And they should not be in a position to be telling you, well, you've never done this, so why do you want me to do it? So it helps to take a step back and look at your own teaching to see what you're doing and is it innovative and does it have interesting things. Now, again, chances are you are one of the more successful people in your department. Otherwise, you would not be made the department head. So this is something that you are fully capable of doing. It helps to have a well-funded research program. Again, department heads may not be evaluated by the dean on their research capability because their role is mainly administrative. But still, it helps to have research going on the side. That way, you have something to fall back on because at some point you will not be the department head anymore. So you should have something interesting to do that you can fall back on. It helps to make sure that you contribute to your profession. Again, as department head, a lot of official mail will come to you regarding conferences and opportunities for being reviewers or for being session chairs or things like that. And it helps to take up some of those responsibilities yourself rather than assigning them to somebody under you. And so again, leading from the front is an important aspect. If you continue to be successful in these activities, then people will not question your judgment and your leadership. Tip number 8, apply standards uniformly. It is, you have to be fair. It is very crucial. If you're not perceived to be fair, then you're not effective. Good work should be rewarded, even if you do not like the person. And this happens in an academia. Each faculty member is allowed to they're sort of an island of excellence in some sense. They are allowed to make their own research programs and teach in their own way. And, every person will not necessarily like every other person in the department. And so when you're doing an evaluation, you have to remember that you're not evaluating the person. You're actually evaluating the folder that's in front of you. You're evaluating the piece of work that is done. And so if somebody has done good work, that should be rewarded, even if you personally don't like that person. If there is a perception of favoritism, then that can lead to all sorts of moral problems amongst faculty. At the end of the day, you cannot make faculty do what they don't want to do. And if they feel that you're not on their side, then they will stop working. And this is not only bad for the faculty member, it's also bad for you. It is possible to be nice and tough at the same time. This is a fine act. It's a balancing act. But you have to have your standards. The standards should be articulated. They should be clear. And you can still be the nice guy in the department who is upholding those standards. It is possible. Tip number 9, do what you think is right, not what you think is popular. And this is important because at the end of the day, you will find out that it is impossible to please everybody all the time. If you ask faculty what they really want, everybody would like to have a job where there is no work, but the pay is very high. And that's impossible. So at the end of the day, there will always be situations where you have to make a judgment call. You cannot go by what the majority thinks. It's your decision. So you have to decide which way to go. And so if you are doing what you think is right, you will at least be applying the standards more consistently. And people may not like you, but they will at least respect you because you have integrity and you are applying your rules consistently. And so that's, again, I have been in this situation several times, and finally at the end of the day, you have to at least satisfy your conscience that you did the right thing. And then finally, my last tip number 10 is know when to quit. Department head's job is probably the most demanding administrative job in the university. Again, like I had said before, faculty sort of view you as a colleague, not necessarily as your boss and as the boss. The person who's above you, who's the dean, he will or she will probably, anything that is unpleasant is given to the department head to administer, because finally it's the department head's role to tell a faculty member what they did that was not pleasant or correct or right from an administrative viewpoint. It is easy to blame the department head for all problems. So the faculty may blame the department head because they may say you're not giving us resources, and the dean may blame the department head for saying, oh, you have a department where nobody is working. So you sort of hear it from both sides, from above and from below. Administrative constraints are frequently very difficult to explain to faculty. Any faculty member will come and say, well, if the department had 3 more technicians and funding to go to 4 more conferences, especially 2 of which were international, then I would be more well known and I would be more effective. Now, all that costs money, and you go to the dean, and the dean says, okay, we don't have the money this year. It's very difficult to explain that to faculty, that their wish list is too long. Now, you will see this, and those of you who are department heads have probably seen this. At some point, you would have annoyed a large number of faculty members in your department. That's the reality. The chair's job is a tough job. Everybody is coming and asking you for some favor at some point, and it's sort of your job to be saying no. Sometimes they will go over you and talk to the dean, and sometimes the dean may have a different viewpoint than you do, which would then annoy them even more. In general, what I have seen is, the faculty job, the job of a department head is sort of lonely. It becomes lonely. Um, don't expect praise from faculty for all your hard work because they, at least again in the US, department heads make more money. And so there is a sense that, well, you're being paid to do this, so you're not doing any favors to me. So it's a tough job. It can wear out. And so you should know when to quit. Usually department head positions have term limits. So one would like to leave when, you know, you should know when to leave. You should leave when, you feel you have accomplished things, and you should have things to go back to. And that's why it's important to have, lead from the front, so you have things to do when you're no longer department head. Now, what can you do uh, after you've been department head? So it usually helps to look for another job. Could be in the same university, could be in another university. The usual steps up would be to be either the dean of the college. So you ran a department, now you're running the whole college. There are also opportunities to be a research administrator. So, again, at least in the US, we have a research office, and usually you need administrative experience to even apply there. And so if you have run a fairly large, well-funded research program, you can become a vice president of research or an assistant vice president of research or something like that. We also sometimes have research centers. So there may be, for example, in South Alabama, there's a center for lung biology. That's a very successful center, and it's an interdisciplinary center with people from medicine as well as engineering. And they're looking for fundamental as well as applied research for lung diseases. So one could be the head of such a center if that's your research area. And so those are sort of opportunities one can look for. If you're effective as a department head, you will go up in the hierarchy. And at least what, again, I'm not dean yet, but I will be end of this month. And I've talked to other deans, and what they tell me in general is that the job sort of gets easier in some sense. I don't know. I hope that's true. And so I'm going to stop here, and I want to see if there are any questions. So questions, it's open.
Just give them a couple of minutes to type themselves.
Okay.
What if a faculty is reluctant to take up an assigned responsibility?
Yeah, that's a tough job. Um, if you ask a faculty member to do something, the initial response is usually no, and that's why it helps to have your vision laid out. I think what I have seen work for me is if you just assign something, they will not do it. But if you explain to them what the big picture is, what their role, why their role is important, and I think it helps to know for that faculty member that other people are also being assigned similar things. Um, when you put it in that framework, it seems to work okay, at least in my experience.
How do you guide faculty if they are new to publishing papers? Any tips?
Yeah. So what I have done is, again, this helps if the department head is active in research. And I have included some of the young faculty into my research. I have asked for their assistance, when I'm publishing. And the easiest way to do that is you start calling them for your research meetings. And so when they come in, they may have expertise that could help, could be a small part, but still a part. And so if you put them in as a third author or a fourth author, then at least they got one paper out. I've done this with young faculty. They also get to see, more importantly, how you're running your research meetings. And so they will be in that situation, and at least they know the expectation is that they have to do that. And so they learn from that, and they go from there. What I've also done is very frequently we are in a situation where faculty members, they wrote their thesis, but they're not able to take that thesis and make it into a publication. And so that's something, you basically have to carve out some time. You have to say, okay, I'm going to give you 10% of your time this semester. This is what I expect you to do. The work is already done. Your thesis is already there. You need to now send a publication out of it. And when you put those time limits on it, again, this is something that could encourage them to actually finish that job. I have also offered to read their manuscripts before they are sent out. Frequently, faculty members, and again, if you have not done this before, it's not that they don't know English, but they may not have written it in that format that is acceptable to journals. And so a little bit of editing there can help. So those are things that have worked for me.
At UG level, how do you handle cases of plagiarism?
Yeah. So at least, so what we have done is we have, so there are two things. First thing is the rules have to be written up on what plagiarism is and what the consequence will be. So that's important because students need to know. Very frequently students don't even realize that if you cut and paste from the internet, that's plagiarism, because their thing is, I didn't copy the whole paragraph. I just copied one sentence from here and one sentence from there. So what we have had to do is we have had to come up with a document where we define what plagiarism is, and then the consequence, the way we handle it is, so there are several levels. So the first level is the faculty member who caught the student plagiarizing will say, okay, this is what the person did, and this is the penalty I'm giving. And the penalty usually could be something like either getting a zero in that assignment, or maybe you're reducing the grade by one letter grade. Now the student has a choice. Student can either accept it or not accept it. So if the student accepts it, then the student comes to the department head with the faculty member, and the faculty member will explain, this is what happened, this is what I've done, and the student signs on a piece of paper saying I accept. Then the matter ends there. Now if the student doesn't, let's say the student disputes that, then it goes to a college committee. And the college committee has a faculty member from each department. And more importantly, it also has some student members. So usually, now the student members are not elected, they are appointed by the dean or the department chair. It's usually the dean. And what we normally do is we take some of the good students, people who are like the top ranked students, and put them on the committee, because they are usually the ones who are more concerned that, oh, everybody else is copying, so my, if I get 95 and everybody else gets 95, then how will they know that I'm better than others, because they all copied from me. So usually the good student, in fact, what we have seen is on these committee, I've been on this committee before, and what I have seen is the students tend to be the hardest critics for plagiarism. So what we do is, then that committee looks at the case to see whether plagiarism occurred or not, and then they will have a penalty. And then at that point, the student has no choice. Then he has to go by that decision. Now, it's not that the student is always wrong and the faculty is always right. We had this case where two students, they got zeros in their tests for, basically the charge was that they had copied each other's, and they challenged it. And at the college level, we found out that what had happened was the faculty member had given a test. It was an open book exam, and he gave the same test he had given the previous year, and he allowed not only books but also notes. And he had given the solution for the previous year's test to the previous year's class. So these students had that paper, and so the charge of plagiarism was thrown out because the students said we were sitting on two opposite ends of the room. We were not even sitting close to each other, so we could not have copied from each other. And we copied from a piece of paper which the instructor himself had given. And so that's not our fault, because the same question was asked. And so sometimes the student is not necessarily wrong. And so, but it helps, you have to have a written document. It has to be given to the students on the first day of class so they know what the rules are. Otherwise, copying at the undergraduate level can become rampant, especially if they feel that faculty members are not doing anything about it.
Kindly suggest ways to improve teamwork among faculty.
Yeah, so I think there is some, uh, at least we have some, department head has some say in the hiring process itself. And so when you're hiring, one of the, we of course look at credentials, but then another aspect we look at is, will this person's research be, will it fit in with what everybody else is doing? Now, sometimes you don't have that luxury. Sometimes you're saying, okay, I'll just hire the best person I can hire. In that scenario, what I have done is I have been, my attitude, again, by nature, I'm collaborative. I like to collaborate with people. So with my own research, I have been able to change, I'll modify what I'm doing a little bit so I can give a piece of it to a colleague who is not that active but has expertise. As an example, I was looking at, again, my background is in process optimization, process control. And we were looking at this problem of fuel cells. So the idea was to take a hydrocarbon and then extract hydrogen from it and then use that in a fuel cell. That was basically the problem. Now there was a heat transfer problem in it, which we typically tend to ignore by saying assume the temperature is constant or assume that the temperature follows a certain profile that we got experimentally. I had a faculty member who was not active in research, and I found out that his expertise was in heat transfer. This is sort of an old-fashioned area. He was well known at one point. Now he doesn't do much research. And so I called him in and I said, I'm working on this problem. I need your help. Do you think you can do this calculation for me? And he was happy to do it. And what we found was some of the assumptions we were making were actually not quite right based on his calculations. So he got to be co-author on publications that I had because of that calculation. And he felt good about the fact that he had contributed. And now he tends to be on committees of several of my students. He's willing to ask all the hard questions. And now he's past 70, but now he has started taking his own students. So, so I think that's one way of initiating collaboration. You have to come out of your comfort zone a little bit. Uh, if you keep doing what you had been doing before, that's not only that not only gets kind of boring. It's also probably not very effective. So coming a little out of your comfort zone not only helps other people, it helps you too. So that's been my experience.
Please share your experience with us about how you managed to get teaching jobs abroad.
Well, I'm already abroad, I guess. Um, so what happens is, at least in the US, we have a system of sabbaticals. So once in 7 years, you're allowed to take one semester off and go somewhere else where the university pays, or you can take a year off. And when you take a year off, university pays half, and you can the other half of the salary will come from the place you're going to. So there is sort of a short term and a slightly longer term opportunity depending on how you work it out. Now, in my case, I have spent my entire academic career in the US, but I have gone abroad. I went to Switzerland for 3 summers. I went to Singapore for one summer, and I went to France for one semester. And this was all through either sabbaticals or summer jobs. In my case, again, I didn't necessarily know people in these areas. The Switzerland thing came about because I met them. I met this faculty member at a conference, and he mentioned that he had read all my papers and he was interested to know what I was doing next. And then once I went one summer, we were collaborating, things were happening, and so he called me the next 2 summers also. Now, while I was in Switzerland, I, uh, I had sent my resume to uh, a couple of places. One in France, and second possibility is there are a couple of courses that find tedious to teach, typically lab courses, for example. And so when such a faculty somebody to replace master or a 1 year assignment are arranged at the department head level normally, or maybe the dean's level, not to go higher than that. In Europe, they have a well-defined process for getting people for research. So you don't necessarily have to teach, and you have to realize in Europe they don't necessarily teach in English. So, that's the issue in Switzerland. I went there on a purely research assignment because they were teaching in French there, which I don't speak very well. Um, so, so I think again, it helps to have a research resume, even if you're looking for a teaching assignment, because that's what makes you more attractive. And the second thing is, if you're willing to teach lab, there will be schools, there will be colleges that may take you up for a semester because their lab guy went on sabbatical.
Many a times, faculty members are reluctant in investing their training and development. In that case, should they be left in the lurch or should frequent requests be made to the college administration? Hello.
I didn't hear it completely. Faculty tend to do what?
Many times, faculty members are reluctant in investing their training and development. In that case, should they be left in the lurch or should frequent requests be made to the college administration?
No, I think if you leave them alone, then not much will get done. I think that's why the evaluation process, you see, there is, at least again in the US, performance is very closely correlated to how much money you make. Uh, Promotions are dependent on performance, and so if you year after year, if your performance is poor, you're not making use of resources available to you, then that's a problem. Um, at least now, that's one aspect. Another aspect is if your department is short-handed, you just don't have enough people, then that's the department head's role to convince the dean that more resources are needed. So if you have 10 faculty and you really need 12, you obviously need two more. You have to make a case, and you have to make a case consistently. My experience has been the first time I go and ask for such resources, I don't get them. I have to keep asking. So it's a fine line, between what you're making faculty do and what you're asking administration for in terms of additional resources. Takes effort. Uh,
If any department has more than 60% female faculty, then how can we handle this situation?
Well, so female faculty, in my opinion, are no different from male faculty. I mean, there is a teaching mission, there is a research mission, there is a service mission. It doesn't matter what their gender is; they still have to do all three. So, so I don't see any, there is no special accommodation, in my opinion. I mean, is there, I don't know, again, is there something specific that happens? I've not been in that situation, so I don't know. I have one female faculty member in my department. We are small, we are seven faculty, so one out of seven is small. So
As a principal of an engineering college, in an atmosphere where remuneration of a teacher or HOD is not a function of his or her output, I find it difficult to find a volunteer for more complex tasks of the college. Any suggestions?
yes, so this is a problem. I mean, if if compensation is not dependent on performance, then there is no incentive for a faculty member to do anything. Um, I don't know if there could be a non-monetary reward, such as going to an international conference, or there has to be a carrot. If it's all it's all stick and no carrot, then nothing gets done. So there could be, maybe there are assignments that are considered more prestigious than others that could be given. Yeah, there has to be an incentive. If there's no incentive, then there's nothing one can do. Uh, you can only request, and faculty will say, well, why should I do it? Doesn't why bother? Um, so I don't know if there's something that is non-monetary that could be priced. Uh, Conferences, in my opinion, are usually the easiest. There is always some budget which could be used to send somebody out of the country, or out of state. That usually has some weightage. Uh, but but yeah, if everybody gets the same money and the same raise and the same promotion, then that's not a good. That's a socialist system then. Uh, so
As a HOD, how do you move with your senior faculty members in the department to maintain a healthy relationship and team spirit?
yeah, so that's a bit tricky. It is a lonely job. I have heard this again. I came from outside, so in some sense, I didn't know anybody, so it was okay. But I have heard from other, HODs where they said they were colleagues till yesterday. Now today they are the boss, and so in the department there is, let's say there are 20 faculty members. You are the HOD and you were friendly with five of them, they were five of them were your buddies. Now you are their boss. So there is people are looking closely at you. How do you treat those five versus the other 15? And so you have to be a little careful. People whom you used to have lunch with every day, now you have to say, okay, if I have lunch with them now, how will people perceive that as favoritism? So, there are two things. One is, are you are you showing favoritism to some people? That's one thing. So you shouldn't be doing that. Second thing is there a perception of our favoritism? So even though you're not showing favoritism, there could be a perception you are because you hang out with a certain number of faculty. Um, that's tricky. I mean, I have seen it both ways. I have seen it one way where um, the department head has, like, we meet for lunch, um, and the whole, now what happens is some people show up, some people don't show up. That's one way, but at least it's open. It's known that everybody is welcome. The second thing I have seen is, we have like a coffee room, and I usually go there at a certain time. At 10 o'clock in the morning, I will go there to get a cup of coffee, and then I'll be there for about half an hour. And everybody knows I am in the coffee room at 10 o'clock. And so if you want to ask me something informally, that is the time to ask. And again, since this is well known, that time I'm there, I've had people come and talk to me at that point before formally bringing it up in a faculty meeting. They are willing to ask me for informally. So I think, again, you should not only be fair, but you should also be perceived to be fair. Otherwise it is difficult to make things happen. Um,
Yeah, regarding the female faculty question, there is a follow-up. The fact is that females faculty expects relaxation in the responsibility assigned to them by
Yeah, well,
female
that's a
faculty.
problem. Uh, again, I mean, in India, I think there may be certain constraints. For example, if you have to stay after, let's say, 5 p.m., there may be a security issue. And I think that has to be accommodated. That's a real issue. But otherwise, in terms of assignments given for research, teaching, and service, there is no. At least I don't see any reason for them to be. They are all faculty members first. The gender doesn't matter. Why should they work less than other people? Uh, Now, there are certain things we have done in the US. For example, if a female faculty member, if they're like pregnant or if they are, they just had a child, then some accommodation has to be made. I think the federal government actually has come up with some rules. Actually, now what they have done is, if a faculty member or actually any employee, if there is a child issue, then the male as well as the female can take the same type of vacation actually, which is unusual, but still that accommodation has to be made. I mean, you cannot avoid that. But what we have seen is, if you look at a career of say 30, 35 years, the childbearing years are only, if you see for how many years they have kids, it's a small number. It's less than 10% in general. So I think other than that, I cannot see any other reason to give them, fewer responsibilities. More responsibility usually means more promotions later on. And so if they work less, then they're unlikely to go to the next level. And I think if it is framed in that way, they may be more willing to do the job, in my opinion.
The attendees are thanking you, and there is a request for the slides if you are able willing to share them.
Sure, sure. I can email them to you and you can,
Sure,
send them to everybody. That'll be fine.
sure. Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Thank you.